In my 400 days in this world, I have already built a huge aquarium, a small zoo, several farms, a super smelter, and much more. You can now see what I have built in these 100 days. Have fun. So here we are again, day 401. The very first thing I did was check to see if the fish were all still alive, which fortunately they were. Then I took a few cacti, of which I only own 3, and temporarily built them on my main island. For a cactus farm, I would need a few more, for which I immediately picked up the other items. I then branched out a bit and started building a cactus farm. Still without cacti, but the device. It's not too complicated, and now I just had to wait for the cacti. Then I collected some wool, because I wanted to start the next project straight away. Namely, I wanted to build a large sheep, so I decided on the space between the 2 old villager statues, and then started building it straight away. Looks pretty funny, I have to say. Of course, I built this for a specific reason, namely to create another wool arm, for which I crafted and prepared all the things. Among other things, I also had to go to quartz for observer arms and craft via 100 scissors. But when I had everything together, I flew to the sheep, and the building could begin. As you can see, I built this in a U-arm and ran out of 19 cabins. Of course, the empty cabins were of no use to me without sheep. I still had to bring them in. So I built a small route from the sheep island to the giant sheep, and then gradually led them to a new home. That was a bit tedious and just took 2 days. I always brought them over in 2 cohorts, and when I was finished, I dismantled the netherrack route again and only had to paint half of it yellow. I did that and the farm was ready to go. The cacti were all grown now, so I took them down and placed them at the cactus farm, which really didn't look good. I had to build a disguise, so I crafted green and light green concrete powder, which I then had the duping machine farm. But I wasn't into cars. I always turned core dirt into normal dirt. But not for too long, because if I stay in the overworld for too long while the duper is on, then the game hangs when I go to the end. I did that for a bit, and in the end it all came out. Then of course I had to turn the concrete odor into normal concrete. So I stood by my concrete onverter for a quarter of an hour and then put a few sandstones in the oven to get smooth sandstone. Then I actually had everything together and building the giant cactus could begin. What do you think? Does it look like a cactus? I built the collection point a little better so that not so many cacti were wasted, and then also a small platform underneath. The cactus arm was then finished. Next, I placed sand at the tubing machine, but I wanted to use the time in the end, so I crafted my second beacon. Then, built a full beacon with haste 2 and started mining obsidian. I did this for about half an hour, which brought me a total of over 13 stacks of obsidian and almost 6 full shulker boxes of sand. Yes, I had enough sand for now. I slammed most of them into the super smelter, but it didn't have much fuel left. So, without further ado, I flew to the primordial skeleton farm and spent 20 minutes there. The yield here was over 30 stacks of bone and 20 stacks of coal. The super smelter now had enough material again. For another construction project, I wanted to mine a few stones from the cobblestone generator when I realized that I could simply build a much better one because I would always need stone. So I gathered all the items for it, and when I had everything, I built myself next to the super oven and started building the better cobblestone generator. I then thought that I had built 1 block too deep, only to realize later that I had actually built it correctly. That's why it took a little longer, but when I was finished, I set up a full beacon next to it, activated haste 2 and tested the cobblestone farm for 5 minutes, and yes, it is worlds more effective than the old one. Almost 30 stacks stone. Now, I had more than enough stone for the next construction project, but what I was still missing was white and red concrete, which I used to craft the powder and use it to briefly activate the duper. Immediately afterwards, I made it normal concrete. Then I built a dirt area so that they could become grass blocks. And lastly, I needed nether wart blocks. To do this, I crafted my first diamond hoe, put mending, fortune, efficiency, and unbreaking on it, renamed it, and one thing I absolutely had to do was upgrade it to netherite. I even got an achievement. With the new hoe, I picked up a few narrow wart blocks, and now I was ready to build. I picked a good spot and started building the next island. It turned out to be a stable lighthouse with a full beacon underneath, and at the end, I colored the light beam into a matching red. I have to say, I find it really cool. What do you all mean? Since I hadn't yet built a panel around the cobblestone generator, and it looked really ugly, I wanted to tackle that next. For this, I wanted to build a stone block around it, and I first had to decide which range of blocks I wanted to use for it. I then decided on light gray concrete powder, light gray wool, cleanstone, and gray wool. I had everything except the concrete powder, so I wanted to have it farmed by the duping machine, where suddenly one side was broken. I didn't know why, but I repaired it straight away, and luckily it worked again. Then I had everything together, and building could begin. It took a really long time for it to look like that. I actually wanted it to look like that, but oh well. At least I had a fairing now, and it was easy to fly in. The whole earth now became blocks of grass, and since I was too stupid to dismantle them with my Silk Touch pickaxe, I crafted a new diamond shovel, put Silk Touch, Efficiency, Mending, and Unbreaking 3 on it, and renamed it. This definitely made things a lot quicker. It had been a long time since I built the villager trading island. Now I finally wanted to make it more beautiful, and above all, finish it. So I started to expand the floor a little, and then build the villager building a little nicer. Unfortunately, I ran out of stone, but since I now had an extremely good stone farm, I of course used it and was a bit AFK. Unfortunately, it took a little too long as my netherite pickaxe simply broke. Yeah, it didn't taste good, I have to say. Well, I then simply made myself a new diapizake, but since I no longer had any silk ouchuch, I quickly got a village from the breeding station and simply used the silk ouchuch on the 2D trigot. I bought 5 of them straight away and then said goodbye to him. Since I was out of levels, I wanted to go to my gold P-arm in the nether, and then this happened. When I went out and went in for a moment, things looked even worse, and I was really scared for my world. When I restarted the game, thank God, everything was fine again, and I could breathe deeply again. At the pigment farm, it didn't take long until I got a few levels with which I then hit Efficiency, Mending, and Unbreaking 3. And of course, I then renamed it and made it a netherite pickaxe. Next, I farmed a little spruce wood, or actually a lot, more than a shulker box. Then I prepared things for more villager abines, got another level with which I slapped Efficiency 5 on my fortune pickaxe, so that I could quickly farm cobblestone with it. Then I was actually ready. Only after a few minutes I realized that I wasn't using spruce wood for the trading island, but dark oak wood. So I farmed dark oak wood for a short time, but now I was really ready. So the building could begin. On the 438th day, I was finished, and I think the trading island looks really cool now. I then built a full beacon in the middle under the island, the top layer of which I filled with diamond blocks. Then it was time to equip the cabins. So over the next few days, I brought one villager after another to their new workplace. First 3 shepherds, then 3 tanners, then 3 armorsmiths, then 3 toolsmiths, and finally 4 farmers and 4 cartographers. It took some time, but when I was finished, I traded briefly with the shepherds, and one even happened to offer me yellow wool, which will definitely help me with the pixel art. Since I always had to fly back and forth between the individual buildings, for example, from the super oven to my warehouse, and that was a bit annoying, I finally wanted to change that. So I started building a small path from the trading island to the other buildings. I don't know if what I built is really the real thing, but maybe I'll build the path out of glass blocks. Feel free to write in the comments whether you would leave it like that, or if I should build the path out of glass. Next, I wanted to finally improve my sword because it wasn't very good yet. I also needed a Sharpness 4 book and a Sweeping Edge 3 book, neither of which I had yet. So I quickly got 2 villagers and hoped that I would get one of the 2 books. That took a while, and I finally settled for a Sharpness 1 book. I had to try a little longer for the other book, but then I bought it straight away. Now, I just had to slap the books on the sword again, but I didn't have any levels left for that, so I went to my OB arm in Nether, where the levels just come to you. So the sword got Sharpness 5, but again, I didn't have enough level for the last upgrade. So I stood at the farm again for a few seconds, and then I was able to complete the sword. At least almost. Of course, I still had to make it netherite. Since I didn't have any of it anymore, I stood at the creeper farm for 5 minutes and wanted to craft TNT, which is when I realized that there were still a few stacks of gunpowder at the old monster farm. I crafted 6 stacks of TNT, brewed fire resistance potions, and then went into the nether, where I hunted ancient debris for the next half hour. With TNT, it was relatively easy, and I got 32 pieces. With this, I was able to craft a whole 8 netherite, which I used to upgrade the sword, the shovel, and the breastplate. I then went to see how much the wool poor had already earned me, which was rather a disappointment. Apparently the farm wasn't working most of the time because I was too far away. But since I wanted to tackle a somewhat larger construction project again anyway, namely a small city, I could combine that with that, and so I simply decided to build it next to the giant sheep. So I stood by the stone farm for a while and then immediately started building the platform for it. Of course, I couldn't just leave the floor made of stone. Unfortunately, I didn't have enough grass blocks, and so I had to use the quartet method again, which took a relatively long time, and at some point I even ran out of gravel blocks. So I farmed gravel for 10 minutes and was able to use it to complete the floor of the new city. Since my hoe was pretty badly damaged by all the trouble, I stood by the gold farm again and had it repaired. Then the building of the new city started straight away, and I started with the rough floor plan. Then I gathered a few things together and built a small fountain in the middle and a little decoration around it, which I think looks pretty sturdy. For the house I wanted to build now, I had to prepare a few blocks, including some oak wood and white concrete. Once I had everything together, I could begin building the very first house. So the rough construction was finished, and I immediately got a horse and then a mule, which now found their place in the enclosure of the very first house. I then took a little care of the interior of the house, and then wanted to decorate the outside area a bit, but there wasn't enough space at the back. So I farmed some soil and stone again. I used this to expand the island by 4 blocks on each side. Now the space was there, and I trashed the house around it. But then I was finished, and my first semi-serious house in the oneblock elt was now standing. What do you all mean? I think it's really cool. I then went to check on the wool arm to see how much she had brought me in the meantime, and luckily it was a lot more than before. This meant I could now continue with the pixel art, which I did straight away. I used not only the wool from the mega sheep, but also the wool from the old wool poor, until I really had 0 yellow wool left. That's what it looked like, and it's slowly starting to take shape. I then renamed the 2 animals at my new house, one a premium horse and the other a stable mare, which aren't the best names, but oh well. Then I transported all the items from the oneblock to my warehouse, where I came up with the idea of just doing that, to connect and also do it automatically. But I also wanted to make it look cool, and built this green pipe from Super Mario to look at it, which I really liked, so I decided to build that too. I started building right from the first end, namely the mega box, until I ran out of light green concrete. So I had the dubing machine farm it for me, and at the same time, I made it into normal concrete. Until it became too stressful for me, I dubbed everything at once, and then turned everything into normal concrete at once. I finished it on the 477th day, and after briefly repairing my tools, I was able to continue building the Super Mario Roars. Looks pretty funny, I have to say. Or what do you think? So the pipe didn't do me any good. I had to turn it into an item transporter. So I started building this one in the middle, just out of ice and water. Now the horizontal transport has already been done, but finally the items still have to be transported upstairs to the crate storage. So I gathered the things for an item elevator and built it straight away, which wasn't too difficult. So the system was actually completed, and I finished it with a small redstone construction. The moment of truth had now come, and as you can see, the item transport worked flawlessly. I took advantage of the new system straight away and stood at the worm block for about 20 minutes, where I cracked the 30-0R mark. For the next house that I wanted to build, I briefly stood at the concrete construction and got a few stacks of white concrete with which to begin. When I was finished, I got jungle leaves and a few vines, with which I was able to beautify the outside area of the house a little, which I think made the house a little nicer. Since the box with the unsortable items was already completely gone, I spent the next 15 minutes sorting the few things. But luckily, I don't have to do that often. Then I wanted to continue at the zoo again, but this time with a slightly larger mob, namely a guest, for which I immediately built the cage, which of course had to be a little larger. Now all I had to do was bring the guest in, which sounds easy, but I wasn't sure how that should best be addressed. I brewed invisibility potions, and then unfortunately found out that I could still shoot a guest, which wasn't so optional now. Well, I then placed a little lava in the cage, and the moment of truth came. I placed the guest, but it simply got stuck in the wall and unfortunately collapsed. Luckily, I had another spawn egg, which I placed on the ground this time, and managed to do that. But I still had to give him a name tag, which was scary for a moment, but went without any problems. Of course, I didn't want to leave it alone with Wumb, so I started building the third floor. Unfortunately, I didn't have enough slime blocks for the slime cage, but I was able to fill the others with the animals. First up was the mule, then the endermite, then the skeleton, and that was it. I wanted to get Shalka next, and I thought I could get them through the warning block quickest. So I took it down for a few minutes and got a Shalka relatively quickly. Unfortunately, I somehow didn't manage to get her into the boat or the minecart, and I also saw a flying turtle for the first time in my life. Well, the Shalka then killed itself, but I wanted to try it again, so I stood at one block for about 20 minutes until the next Shalka. Even with this Shalka, I was absolutely unable to get her into a boat or minecart, which was supposed to be possible. To be on the safe side, I flew briefly to an end city, and strangely enough, things worked there without any problems. Well, the only way I'm going to do this is to transport a Shalka from the end to the overworld. I wanted to do that right away, where I first looked for one of the next endites. I soon found one, and the chosen Shalka was waiting for me downstairs. I immediately put them in a boat, and then I started building the long path to the inner end island, which was about 1,000 blocks. I then got there and now had to craft lots and lots of rails. I got iron from each of the iron farms, where it was the output of the first farm, that of the second, that of the two small ones, and the farm in the nether completely destroyed everything again. There was so much excess that even the hoppers couldn't pick up anything. All in all, I had a Shalka box full of iron blocks. I then crafted a few rails, with which I started the route from the inner end island to the end city, which also took a while. Then the time had come and Shalka's journey began. I had to build a platform out of slabs around the end portal so that the Shalka goes safely through the end portal. I then brought the Shalka into the end portal, and all I had to do was destroy the boat, and in no time she was in the overworld. There, I brought her to her new home, but unfortunately, I couldn't destroy the minecart. But it doesn't matter. The main thing is that I used the last day to clean up the island a little, and I went to see for the first time how much the cactus arm earned me, which was quite impressive. Then it was already evening, and I watched the sunset. That was it. I survived 500 days in Minecraft Hardcore 1 block without dying.